It was the 14th of August this year when I actually attended an event in Huddersfield at the Hudavi Centre, and I learnt a lot about what is NATO, and there was lots of perceptions and beliefs that were smashed for me in particular, because in my opinion, or my understanding at that time, was NATO was an institute or an organisation which was all about defence after the Second World War, created for Europe, or for the protection of Europe, specifically against the former Soviet Union. However, I found out a lot about NATO's humanitarian role at that time and what NATO does. And I have with me today Rashid Bukhari, who runs the Community Access Point in Huddersfield and various other organisations. Who'll tell us a little about more about that then. And Dr. Harold Ellison, a senior fellow for the Institute for Statecraft, one of the organisations which has been pivotal in ensuring that this project is successful. And in reality, the project is about taking young people to the NATO headquarters in Europe, finding out a little bit more about NATO. And today at the Khidmat Centre in Bradford, we're learning about what has happened from this visit and what people have learned from it, what the young people have learned from it, and the adults from the community, the Asian community in particular as well, what they've come back with. And I'm pleased to be sat here next to Dr. Harold Ellison. Good afternoon, or is it evening now?
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
It was lovely meeting some of your colleagues last time around and learning about the Institute for Statecraft and your role within this organisation. Can you tell us what it is that you did to facilitate these visits, and what is the mission that you're trying to accomplish during this time?
Well, this programme is called Why NATO Matters, and it's trying to introduce people to the role of NATO as an organisation, and particularly young people, to get them to appreciate that this is an important part of Britain's foreign policy, and it's an important organisation in terms of keeping our peace and security in our particular part of the world. And so it's an important organisation to understand. And I think the people who've got involved in this programme have got a lot from it in that way. So, and it's been a useful exchange of ideas too, I think.
I mean, previously we would have understood the role of NATO. It was quite, within a box, I suppose, that this is what NATO does. However, the world has changed, times have changed, and I suppose warfare and politics have changed during that time as well. And maybe we're now looking more at things such as cyber attacks and things to do with cyber issues, rather than the conventional, traditional war as we expect. However, NATO isn't just about protection, is it? Or is that the main role of NATO still?
Well, the main role of NATO is based on its Article 5, the NATO Convention, which is about mutual security. So every member of NATO is able to rely on that if one of them is attacked, all the other members will come to their aid. So essentially, in its most fundamental form, it's about mutual security. But it obviously undertakes humanitarian operations as well, peacekeeping operations.
And Dr. Ellison,
normally, and there have been instances where this hasn't been the case, but in nearly every instance, if it's to undertake an operation out of area, it would be done as part of a United Nations operation.
Dr. Ellison, what do you believe has been the most significant achievement of this exchange of people, or the transition across, or people finding out more about what's happened? What do you feel the young people will have gained the most?
I think they will have seen that this is an organisation that is doing a lot of good things. The first is that it's something that is defending our collective security, so the security of people in this country and in the region. But that it's also contributing to other operations, peacekeeping, humanitarian operations, etc. And I think it's always useful at that age, to see what big international organisations are doing, whether it's the EU or NATO or the United Nations, and it just helps to open their eyes a bit, and that's a good thing. Whether they agree with everything NATO's been involved in or not, it does matter, and it's important that they should see why it matters, and that's what this programme really is about.
And we're going through unprecedented times within the United Kingdom with regards to our Brexit transition, I suppose, at this moment in time. Do you think or believe that there is NATO or our membership of NATO is at any risk of this at this current time or maybe in the coming future?
Well, I think we are living in an era of great change. You've mentioned that warfare is changing and security is changing, and we've got cyber warfare and all these different things. We're living in an era of rapid technological change, which changes the way we live our lives. And we are living in an era of political change. Brexit, whichever way one looks at it and whether one likes it or not, is an enormous change. And to some extent, some people would say that American attitudes of the current administration towards NATO may be different to those of the previous administration. So there's change in all sorts of ways, but I think that NATO is going to be a constant, and certainly British participation in NATO is going to continue, and it's going to continue to be extremely important in addressing the sort of problems that the world faces and that Europe faces.
And finally, Dr. Ellison, as you've alluded to the fact that things are changing and rapidly changing with regards to politics and warfare and how things have developed within world geopolitics as well. And there's this demand from America for Europe in particular for 2% of GDP to be put into NATO. Do you think or believe that the traditional weapons or traditional war machinery such as aircraft carriers, etc., is there still a need for those sorts of things, or should we be putting more money into technology and into checking and listening to what's going on around the world?
Right. Well, you're really putting me on the spot, and I'm feeling like I was back being an MP again now. But I'm not a spokesman for NATO, so I have to be careful what I say. So anything I say is really a personal opinion, and I think one of the characteristics of what's happening at the moment is that things, particularly technology, are changing so quickly. So threats are changing immensely rapidly. When we look at how what was considered a threat 20 years ago is now completely different. Now just a single person can do billions of dollars of damage if they hit the right kind of point of vulnerability. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. So we're living in a totally different world, and security has to respond to these challenges in a totally different way. And I think whether aircraft carriers will continue to be important in the same way in 20 years' time is an open question. I suspect that they will.
Dr. Ellison here talking about changing times and the way the world is changing and transitioning as well. We've just got a few minutes left, and we'll have a very quick chat with Rashid Bukhari Saab, just a minute, I suppose, because we are quickly running out of time. Rashid, you've been, again, instrumental from a community point of view and from a locality point of view in leading and heading up this project with young people from this locality, and you visited NATO with the young people and other colleagues. What do you feel has been mostly gained from this visit?
Well, thank you. The Huddersfield Pakistani Community Alliance was commissioned by the Institute of Statecraft to deliver this project, and it wasn't just Huddersfield, it was also Dewsbury and Bradford engaged in this, and it was all about young people. Now, the four organisations involved: Huddersfield Pakistani Community Alliance, Khidmat Centre, Bangladesh Youth Organisation, Bradford based, and Come On You All in Dewsbury, we all have leadership programs for our young people. This fitted in beautifully with our leadership programs. Our young people were given the opportunity to learn about an organisation that has existed long before they were born, and they had literally no knowledge about, because it has no relevance to their lives whatsoever, or so they thought so. But going through this programme of Why NATO Matters is given them a real understanding, and this evening this programme that we've got is our young people will actually present their findings and their learnings. So the impact of it has been not just with the young people, but also within their families and then wider through the community. So we'd like to think that this had quite a significant impact, but not just in Huddersfield, but also in Bradford and Dewsbury.
And is this the first phase of the project? Is there another phase that we can look forward to? Or is tonight the culmination of those findings, and maybe in the future something else will happen?
The intention is entirely that this is just the beginning. We do intend to develop further programs. What they look like, we're not quite sure yet, but we have a long-standing relationship with the Institute of Statecraft. A lot of projects that we've done in the past, particularly with the British Army, etc., have been through the Institute. So there's a lot more to come. We have a tremendous amount of talent within our community, and our young people are a fantastic resource. We want to ensure that these young people get as many opportunities as possible, and they are given the platforms to further themselves.
And one final question, and a little bit of a personal question, I suppose. And you're quite evidently and quite obviously somebody that's your historic roots are not from this country, I suppose. Did you find a personal allegiance with NATO throughout this journey, or were you already aligned with NATO before you went there? And I know last time on the 14th of August we talked to young men and people from diverse backgrounds, from BME communities that were part of NATO, or worked for NATO, or been in the military in some position or other. And for yourself, at the beginning, did you have any trepidations about NATO, and have you found something else that's changed your opinions maybe that were formed previously?
No, not necessarily. Myself, my colleagues, we understand the importance of these organisations. However, we do feel that Muslims, the communities, are underrepresented in these organisations. So my endeavour is to push our communities through into these organisations so they become part of the decision-making process. So by doing that, then where communities are saying that we're not heard, well, we're going to change that whole perspective, hopefully.
Rashid Bukhari from the Muslim Community Alliance, thank you very much.
Thank you.